I'ma keep winning, winning. I'ma keep winning, winning. Ooh. I'ma keep winning, winning. You can try to save yourself, but you only go.
What's going on, guys? Jake Ham back with another video, and we are officially 2 days into free agency, and we've had a lot of signings with a lot of guys with a bunch of different teams. A lot of big money has been handed out, and we're going to go ahead and grade them here in this video. But before we get into it, please make sure to like the video, comment down below anything you agreed or disagreed with that I talk about in here, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for future NFL content that I'm going to be putting out, whether it's the next couple days of free agency, whether it's NFL Pro Days coming out, whether it's the NFL Draft. Make sure to subscribe to keep up with all of it. And in this video, I'm going to be ranking every single, most of the signings throughout free agency of the first day and one and two. Most of the ones that, I kind of wanted to talk about. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting out with the first free agent signing that I want to talk about is Drew Dalman. He ended up getting a 3-year, $42 million, $14 million a year from the Chicago Bears. And for this signing, I'm going to give them a B plus. The Bears have been doing a lot of work this offseason and trying to upgrade their offensive line for Caleb Williams, mostly going out and trading for Jonah Jackson to play one guard and making sure to go ahead and trade for Joe Thuney, who's kind of a shocking trade in the last couple of weeks. And then as soon as free agency starts, the tampering period opens. They pretty much almost immediately, the rumors were true of them targeting Drew Dalman, and they go and sign him almost immediately to this 3-year deal, 14 million. There was reports out there that he had some other teams interested in him, maybe the Seahawks, maybe the Packers, teams like that. And none of them were actually listed. And the report was that he was offered a lot more money from those teams than going to the Bears, but he decided to make sure to pass up on those offers and go play center for the Chicago Bears. And I think he was really drawn to the new head coach, Ben Johnson, kind of what they did with their offensive line with the going in and adding Joe Thuney. And they've made it a goal from the jump to be able to come out this offseason and upgrade the offensive line for Caleb Williams to make sure that Caleb Williams has that protection after being one of the most sacked quarterbacks in history. And with Ben Johnson's offense, to be able to be successful, they have to be able to run the ball and have a dominant offense. If you look at the Detroit Lions with the last couple of years, as they've gone on, they one of the biggest focuses that they had was the offensive line, going out and signing Penei Sewell. They already had Frank Ragnow, and they went out and signed a couple guys, brought in Kevin Zeitler, and that led to them being one of the most dominant offenses in the NFL. And I think that's really what they're trying to replicate here in Chicago, especially being able to have Caleb Williams, and they set themselves up nice in the draft. I think that they're going to end up trying to either target defensive line, even though they ended up signing Grady Jarrett and a couple other guys. But I think that they're either going to try to target an edge player on defense, or they're going to end up going and draft a running back, is how I think that they're really trying to set it up. Whether Genty falls, whether they move up for Genty, or whether Amarian Hampton is there at number 10. I think they're really trying to set up them being able to draft a running back. On to the next signing I want to talk about is Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw was with the New York Jets as defensive tackle on kind of like a 1-year deal. He goes into free agency and he goes in and signs with the Washington Commanders for a 3-year, $45 million deal that nets him about $15 million a year. And he gets more than Drew Dalman in this deal. And I don't understand why or what team would give him this. This is too much money and a way big overpay for Javon Kinlaw, in my opinion. I'm going to give this signing a D minus. I'm not a fan of this. I was not a fan of Javon Kinlaw. I was a Jets fan watching last year, and watching him, he was one of the reasons that the Jets had their issues and they couldn't stop the run whatsoever. Quinnen Williams was getting a lot of the double teams, and Javon Kinlaw could not break through and be that run stopper that a lot of people thought, and be that defensive player and that interior that was going to be able to stop the run. And I wouldn't really dish out this money. This is definitely a big overpay for the Commanders. I understand what they're trying to do. They had to end up cutting Jonathan Allen. They couldn't get anything back in a trade for that. They had one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. But watching the Jets closely last year, I just seen Javon Kinlaw. He had a lot of penalties. He didn't give a lot of effort. He couldn't stop the run. So I don't necessarily see what the Commanders are seeing here to give him $15 million a year. This is one of my least favorite signings that we've had in free agency. I just do not like it. I would not have given him nowhere near, especially with the amount of effort that he was giving last year. And every single time we looked around, the Jets would get a stop. Javon Kinlaw, you kind of had to hold your breath because he would do something stupid and he would do something that would end up costing them and preventing the offense from staying on, giving them either a necessary roughness penalty or a personal foul, whatever it was. He always seemed like the type of guy that would end up drawing that penalty on the Jets to be able to extend the offense. And I'm not a big fan of it, so I'm gonna end up giving this a D minus. On to the first quarterback that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Justin Fields. He ended up signing with the New York Jets from the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 years, $40 million, $20 million average a year. And this is pretty much kind of like a bridge slash prove it deal for the New York Jets with Justin Fields. They're pretty much bringing him in for the 2 years. If he ends up coming in and he plays great, then they're going to keep him for the extra year and then work on a contract extension. If he ends up coming in and he doesn't play very well, then at least the Jets will most likely have a top pick and a very good quarterback class next year. I'm going to give this a B. I really like it. It was a little bit more money than what I was expecting with Justin Fields to be able to get, but they pretty much had to pry him away from the Pittsburgh Steelers situation. Pretty much what it came down to, I think, was that the Steelers would not commit to Justin Fields being the starting quarterback and being the guy. They still had Russell Wilson. There were still rumors of Aaron Rodgers being able to go to Pittsburgh. And I think Justin Fields was kind of fed up with that, with him not being the certified guy, being the number one quarterback for the Steelers. So he went ahead and went with the Jets situation. They did have to offer him a little bit more money to be able to get him away, but I think he was very enticed by the Jets situation. He has a couple of Ohio State guys that he played with. He played with Garrett Wilson. He played with Jeremy Ruckert, the tight end for the Jets. And from the Jets' point of view, being able to go in and get a young quarterback with a lot of guys that have turned their careers around in new locations recently. You've had Baker Mayfield, you've had Geno Smith, you've had Sam Darnold, you've had all those situations. And I think that they're going to come in with a new coaching staff, Aaron Glenn. I think this is the type of guy that he's going to want. He's going to want more of a mobile quarterback. And they're going to try to solidify the run game just like they did in Detroit, play hard defense and run the football. That's what the Jets' identity is going to be next year, and Justin Fields allows you to do that. He's able to be implemented into that run game that they're going to try to establish, and he's going to be able to hopefully not turn the ball over. His numbers have improved. He only had one turnover through that 6 game stretch that he ended up starting. He had 10 touchdowns, five rushing, five passing, and I think that's really what the Jets are going to be looking for as they move on. And if he ends up playing well, then he's going to be continued to be able to be their starting quarterback for the near future. On to the next signing. This is one that I was not a big fan of either. This is Dan Moore going to the Tennessee Titans on a 4 year, $82 million deal, 20 million average. I'm gonna give this a D. Like I said, kind of with the Javon Kinlaw thing, Dan Moore was one of the best offensive linemen in free agency this year. But I think the Tennessee Titans are just overpaying him, trying to get more talent on that line to be able to set up to protect whether quarterback they have, whether it's Will Levis, whether it's Cam Ward coming in at the number one overall pick. I really do think that they had a huge overpay here. Dan Moore is kind of an average starter. The Steelers ended up having offensive line troubles last year, and Dan Moore was kind of part of that issue because he did not play at a very high level. And if you go out and you're paying this guy franchise tackle money, you don't want a guy that ended up struggling part of the way through last year. You want a guy that was very solid starter that has potential. And I'm not necessarily seeing this with Dan Moore. I think this was a huge overpay, especially with a 4 year deal for this guy and giving him $20 million a year for the Tennessee Titans. I think it was just the team that had a lot of cap space that was one of the worst in the NFL, and they've acknowledged that they need to get better at certain positions, and there was not a lot of ways for them to be able to get better at that position for people to want to come and play for them unless they overpaid them. And I think this was one of the worst signings in free agency. I think Javon Kinlaw was the worst signing in free agency. I think Dan Moore's right there, right behind it. And it was just a huge overpay. They're trying to make him a franchise tackle. He could go out and prove me wrong, and he could end up playing very well and being the franchise tackle for the next 4 years. But they're going to end up kicking J.C. Latham back over to right tackle. He hopefully that ends up bringing him back to his normal self. 'Cause he played mostly right tackle in college, and Dan Moore's going to end up taking over that left tackle spot. But I just don't see how you could overpay for this guy, which a lot of teams have done this free agency. It was a lot of different overpays in a bad free agency class. That's kind of what it leads to being, is whenever you don't have a lot of good players, there's going to be a lot of teams trying to bid for those players, and it leads to a lot of overpays. I think that's definitely what we've seen here with Dan Moore and the Tennessee Titans. Now we're going into one of the best signings I think from this free agency class was DJ Reed. He ended up signing for a 3 year, $48 million deal and a 16 million average per year to the Detroit Lions, and he ends up. I'm gonna give this one an A. I was thinking about giving it an A plus, but it's very hard. I think that you have to have a certain scale, so I'm gonna give this an A. I think that this was one of the best signings in free agency. DJ Reed was one of the top corner duos with Sauce Gardner the last couple of years. He was a phenomenal signing for the New York Jets. He just kind of got tired of the organization being unorganized and dysfunctional, and he didn't really enjoy the losing that the New York Jets was having with all the hype that they had. So I kind of knew that he was going to go look for a team that was very solid structure, had a nice culture. I thought he was going to go somewhere like the 49ers with Robert Saleh, his former coach, or maybe somewhere like the Pittsburgh Steelers that has that culture with Mike Tomlin. But he ended up choosing the Detroit Lions, and I think the Lions, from the Detroit standpoint, I think they got a heck of a deal. It was either him or they tried to re-sign Carlton Davis, and in my opinion, I think DJ Reed is the better player over Carlton Davis, and Carlton Davis has kind of dealt with a lot of injuries. Especially last year, he had a couple injuries that caused him to miss some time, which most of the Detroit Lions team did. And they ended up going out and they signed DJ Reed, who I think is the better player, to a contract that's giving out less money than what Carlton Davis got with the New England Patriots, who ended up overpaying him, which we're going to talk about later in the video. And I think the Lions are able to come in and shore up their secondary that definitely struggled towards the end of the last year. And they're pretty much kind of bringing a consistent player that's going to stay healthy, which was one of their biggest issues last year. And I think that they were able to do that since they were able to pretty much bring him in on less money than what they would have had to give Carlton Davis. I think this was one of the best signings of free agency. I'm gonna give this an A. On to one of the best free agents on the market was Milton Williams. Milton Williams was one of the best players available throughout free agency. It was kind of Sam Darnold and Milton Williams was ranked in that top three players. The Patriots ended up going out with a 4-year, 104 million and 26 million dollars a year average. Now, there was rumors that he had agreed to a deal with the Carolina Panthers, and a lot of people thought that he was going to the Panthers. But then the Patriots came in, swooped in, and kind of gave them a bigger deal. The report was that the Panthers were going to give him about 20 million. Then the Patriots came in and offered him 26 million, which was the deal they ended up taking. And I'm gonna give this a little bit of a B minus. I see what the Patriots have to do. They're kind of doing what the Titans are doing. The Patriots have the most cap space in the NFL, but Milton Williams is a heck of a player. He's going to be a very good player on that interior defensive line. He's going to be going next to Christian Barmore. The Patriots have brought in a lot of defensive talent throughout free agency. They brought in Harold Landry, who is familiar with Mike Vrabel. They brought in Carlton Davis. They brought in Milton Williams here to go in on that interior. I just think that they had the overpay for a lot of these guys. A lot of the aspects of the Patriots that we used to know in the last 20 years with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, you come in, they get very good players on cheap deals because the Patriot way, and Tom Brady's taking the pay cut. That's not necessarily the case anymore. They're not one of the better teams in the NFL. They do have Drake May, they do have Mike Vrabel, and I think Milt Williams is going to be a great player for him. He's going to go great alongside Christian Barmore. He's going to be a game wrecker. He was in the Super Bowl. He was in the playoff run for the Eagles. He did have a lot of talent next to him on that defensive line. So we're going to be able to see, and that's going to be the question, is he going to be able to produce the same amount with a less talented defensive line around him compared to what he had at the Eagles? I just think that the Patriots, they did this several times, even with Carlton Davis. They came in, they needed to get a good player. They needed to get more talent on the defense side of the ball. Their defense was not very good last year. Mike Vrabel recognized that. And I definitely think that they overpaid him. They gave him way too much money, $104 million for $26 million a year for a defensive tackle that wasn't even the best defensive tackle on his team last year. And with him being able to be paired up with Christian Barmore, who's going to be the main guy, in my opinion, I feel like, and he's kind of like the second to him, which you need a very good D tackle to be able to make a splash while the other one's getting double teamed and to be able to make good run defense plays. But with him getting $26 million a year, that's just too much in my opinion. And I'm gonna give this a B minus. It could have been better if they got him on a little bit of a cheaper deal. If they were able to get that Panthers contract with a little like 20 million, I think it would have bumped it up to maybe like a B plus. And if they could have gotten him a little bit cheaper, but I just think it's too expensive and a little bit too rich for my taste for Milton Williams. On to another Patriots signing. They needed and recognized that they needed a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. After getting Milt Williams, they came out and got Carlton Davis in the defensive secondary. And I'm gonna give this a C plus. I think it could have been better. I think once again they did overpay for Carlton Davis. They ended up giving a 3 year, $60 million deal worth $20 million a year. The thing is with Carlton Davis, he's a very good player. He's a very good corner, but he had a lot of injuries last year. He missed a lot of time, like I said earlier in the video. And DJ Reed ended up getting less money, and I think he is a better player than Carlton Davis, and he ended up being a better piece for the Jets and being one of the better corner duos. Carlton Davis isn't a bad player. He's a very good player. But to give $20 million a year and give more money to Carlton Davis than DJ Reed is kind of crazy in my opinion. I think the Patriots went ahead and did the same thing that they had to do with Milton Williams to be able to get talent on that defensive side of the ball. They had to come in and overpay the guy for them to be able to see the money attractive and to be able to come to the team like the Patriots and a team that's one of the lesser half of the NFL to be able to come and compete and get certain pieces that they need. They had to go in and overpay, and I think that's exactly what they did with Carlton Davis here. I think that they could have gone for cheaper, and I think they could have went with other options like a DJ Reed and tried to be in that more field and give him about 18, 20 million and had a better cornerback than Carlton Davis. On to another one of the quarterbacks in this free agency market is Sam Darnold. He was considered one of the top free agents in this free agency period. He ended up getting a 4 year, $100 million deal worth $33.5 million a year. This is a decent deal for the Seattle Seahawks. They're definitely getting someone similar to Geno Smith, and they're just pretty much getting younger at this position. And I'm gonna give it a B. Geno Smith was 34 years old, and now they're gonna bring in Sam Darnold, who has a ton of experience as a starting quarterback, and he's only 27 years old. Now, the only question is they just shipped off a lot of their weapons. They ended up going ahead and only keeping JSN. They cut Tyler Lockett. They ended up trading DK Metcalf. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. And towards the end of the year, Sam Darnold ended up struggling because of the Minnesota Vikings interior offensive line was awful and it wasn't very good. And it's kind of the same thing with Seattle here. They have a terrible interior offensive line, and you don't have him the best weapons that he has in Minnesota. So that's not necessarily why it's in what if they ended up having the same weapons and had a good, very, very good offensive line, I would have put this more in an A. But that's kind of the reason I'm putting this at a B, is because I feel like it's a worse situation for Sam Darnold because he has the same kind of similar offensive line that he had in Minnesota with interior not being very good. He does have a franchise tackle like he did with Christian Darrisaw and Charles Cross, but he just doesn't have the weapons that he had. He had Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, and now he's going with just Jackson Smith and Jigba on that roster. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see how he goes in there and if he's able to keep up the level of play that he had in Minnesota with a kind of less talented team. So it's going to be able to see if that $33.5 million is worth it. And I do think it's kind of interesting to see the 4 years that they gave him. So with them giving him 4 years, this isn't necessarily a all right, we're gonna pretty much go in and see how you do for a year or two and then go and reevaluate. No, Sam Darnold's here for the long haul. He's gonna be their starting quarterback. They're going to build around Sam Darnold, and this is the guy that they have picked for their team and their mini rebuild that they're gonna be going into with all the guys that they ended up going away with. They're going to build around Sam Darnold in that offense and try to build a strong defense with Coach McDonald as the head coach. And they're gonna focus on the defense side of the ball and just try to build around Sam Darnold on the offensive side. So they've picked him as their guy, and they're pretty much just sold on him for the next 4 years. And I guess we're gonna see how it goes with them with the Seattle Seahawks and Sam Darnold to see if he's able to keep up that level of play that he had last year in Minnesota with an offensive coach in Kevin O'Connell and a more talented offense. On to one of the most talented safeties that was on the free agent market is Trayvon Moehrig. He got a 3 year deal worth 51 million and $17 million a year. I really like this one. He really came into his own last year with the Raiders, and the Panthers definitely needed more talent. They didn't have as good as talent. And the defense was the reason that they lost a lot of the games. Once Bryce Young kind of came into his own on the offensive side of the ball, the offense with David Canales calling the plays started to click and was able to click very often and put on a lot of points. But the defensive side of the ball was kind of the reason that they would end up losing games. The Panthers would put up almost 30 points and it went to overtime, I think twice towards the stretch, and they lost both those games just because they couldn't end up getting the ball back and getting a stop. They end up locking up a lot of their offensive guys, but they really just need defensive talent. We've seen it with them going after Milton Williams when they almost had him for almost $20 million. And then shortly after it came out that they ended up signing Trayvon Moore, they didn't really have any talented safeties, and their secondary needed a lot of help. And I think with him being able to build off last season and slowly getting better throughout his years, being a former second round pick with the Las Vegas Raiders, John Gruden actually ended up picking this guy whenever he was head coach of the Raiders. I think with him being able to slowly progress and becoming a solid starter in this league, I really do like this deal. I think it was kind of value as safety that they were end up being able to pick up and to just pretty much get their defense more talented to help out Bryce Young. And then the last signing I'm going to be going over is Josh Sweat to the Arizona Cardinals. He ended up getting a 4-year, $76 million deal worth $19 million a year. And he's getting paid as a premier pass rusher, and that's pretty much what he was towards the end of the year last year, especially in the Super Bowl. He gained a lot of money throughout that Super Bowl. He ended up getting, I think, like 3 pressures and 3 sacks, which is crazy. So I'm going to end up giving this an A. I kind of suspected that he was going to be able to go to the Cardinals, and they were pretty much needed defensive line help. They needed edge pressure, and I think that it was pretty much going to be recreated by their head coach, Jonathan Gannon, who used to be the defensive coordinator for the Eagles and is very familiar with Josh Sweat, who actually coached them whenever they went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Josh Sweat seen that. He's seen an opportunity to go and get a bag and get all the money that he needed to and go for a team that somewhat could defend in the NFC West and be able to contend for the division title with the 49ers losing a lot of pieces. And he wanted to go with someone that he's familiar with, and he's definitely familiar with Josh Gannon, their head coach. And I think that they're both familiar with each other. He's able to come in and produce and be able to hopefully continue that pressure and the sack production that he ended up having towards the end of the year, especially with the Super Bowl and throughout that playoff run. And he's able to pretty much come in and affect and improve that defense line for the Cardinals. So these are all the gradings that I ended up doing for free agency throughout the first days 1 and 2 of the time that NFL teams and free agency. So please make sure to like the video and comment down below anything you agreed or disagreed with that I ended up talking about in here. And make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the future NFL content I'm going to be putting out. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, feel like John Morant. Need a triple-double. Told him check the stats. Yeah, I got a couple. I don't drive the ball. Now I never fumble. I'm the MVP. Now I feel like Russell. Feel like John Morant. Need a triple-double. Told him check the stats. Yeah, I got a couple. I don't